This is Sean Ferguson with the Network of Christian Apologists in Calgary, and I'm here with Max Andrews, who is studying for his PhD in philosophy at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. He's going to be delivering a fantastic lecture on God and the multiverse at our next monthly meeting, and he just published a paper on the subject with W. David Beck in the latest edition of Philosophia Christi. The NCAC meeting is Saturday, October 11th, 2014 at 7 p.m. at Rocky Mountain College here in Calgary. And by the way, it'll be 2 a.m. for Max in Edinburgh when he gives the lecture, so we're extremely grateful for his taking the time and burning the midnight oil to share his valuable knowledge with us. That's truly going above and beyond. So thanks so much for being with us today, Max.
No problem. Not at all.
How's life in Edinburgh?
The seasons are changing quickly. I got used to the 4 a.m. sunrises during the summer, but now it's going to be the 4 p.m. sunsets. So the seasons are rapidly changing now.
Oh yeah, that's a big change, I'm sure. So I mean, let's be honest. You moved there for the purpose of gaining early access to Downton Abbey seasons, didn't you?
Yeah. Even just it started last week, and so I've been taunting all of my friends back in the States, and I imagine in Canada it's still a little behind, but we get the series a couple months before the rest of America.
We don't get it until January here, so I've been a little envious.
Yeah, I just watched episode 2 of series 5 yesterday, and it was one of those. It's going to be a good season. So
good to know.
It's good enough to move across the pond for.
Right. Yeah. So aside from early access to Downton Abbey, you're there doing doctoral work in philosophy on issues surrounding God and the multiverse. So this indicates that you have a keen interest in God, philosophy, and physics, particularly the multiverse. So what led you into these interests, and what led you into this current program?
Really is a complex question if I were to do some introspection myself. I did my bachelor's degree in religion and got what I would consider a foundational education in biblical studies and in theology. And of course I had I started asking what I then learned to be more philosophical questions about life and the meaning of life, the purpose, why am I here, etc., the big questions. And so I did my undergrad with that religion degree with sort of philosophical bent. And then I went on to do my MA in philosophical studies, where I focused in philosophy of religion, where I started addressing some of these issues of meaning, purpose, value, existential questions, and philosophy of religion. And what brought me to the multiverse is just really an extension of those existential questions, because my existential questions of why am I here, does my life have any purpose, I came across the teleological argument, which argues that there's an end purpose, there's a design, that telos. And so the more I studied the teleological argument, the design argument, the fine-tuning argument, I came across the multiverse as one of the most prominent subjects or objections there. So to trace it back to its roots, it's really an existential issue for me. And little did I know what I was really getting into when I started unfolding the multiverse, because most people's reactions whenever I tell them, I can tell somebody that I'm doing my doctoral work in the ontology of the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, or I can tell them that I'm doing it in parallel universes, and then one sounds a little bit more sophisticated than the other, but they're really just the same, and a lot of people will give a little chuckle and say, oh, did you read it in a comic book or something? I must confess I've never read a comic book, but that's really the roots of how I got here. It's really just asking existential questions, and then I got into this big mess of the multiverse.
That's very interesting. Yeah. And participating in higher level education, of course, especially from a Christian perspective, it's going to lead to these higher level questions. But I think also the average person on the street, like myself or any other layman, they're going to be led to these existential questions as well, right? So do you think there's a need for Christians in general, and particularly Christian apologists, to be informed on the issues surrounding godly multiverse?
Yeah, I think it's, everybody can't be specialized in one area. Particularly if you're not in academia and you're focusing on one specific area, it's good to have a broad range or broad range of knowledge, and to be able to at least, for example, carry on a conversation about um, recent scientific findings, to be at least, uh, keep some of the knowledge that we learned in high school. I look back at my chemistry notes from high school. Hypothetically, I have no idea where they are, but if I were to look back at my chemistry notes in high school, I would have no idea what I'm reading and balancing these equations and molecules and stuff. That's something that I would have to go back and work on. And so that's my failure there. But on more popular cultural issues that are, particularly in science and philosophy, that are creeping into culture, such as, Big Bang findings, and we found evidence for the multiverse, inflation, all this other stuff. It's really important for Christians to be informed with the scientific literature, whether they're discussing issues regarding the Big Bang, evolution, design, anything in those spheres of debate, and also what I would argue more importantly, the philosophy behind those issues. A lot of what we would consider science is really just philosophy. Philosophy of science is very deep and it's very broad, and science proper is much more narrower, so to speak. So yeah, I think it's very important to be able to at least engage on these issues.
Right. And so you think that a layman could gain enough of a foothold in the issues to speak to them effectively? What's your thoughts on that?
I do, and at least with the multiverse presentation that we're going to go through, my goal is to really make the distinctions between the different type of multiverse models, because it's not monolithic. Whenever I refer to, or someone refers to multiverse, there's many different versions of what a multiverse is. And so what I'll do is I will outline the differences and the categories for each of these models, and the layperson will be able to then identify, okay, that's level 1, that's level 2, 3, and so on. And then with those distinctions, be able to understand a little bit, okay, why is the level 3 unique to a quantum mechanical universe, whereas a level 2 does not require a specific understanding of quantum scenarios. So you don't have to, when I read some of my research, the math goes way over my head. I'm not a mathematician, but I can still follow along with what's being said. And so my goal is to help the lay people understand primarily the differences in the multiverses, and how we should respond to them and understand them. And if it's true, I don't know if it's true, but if it's true, then we ask the next questions of, now what's next?
Right, right. That makes a lot of sense, actually. So, one idea that's often pushed in apologetic circles is that the real motivation behind the multiverse theories is to avoid the need for an intelligent designer who would have produced the highly improbable level of fine-tuning that we see in our universe. Now, of course, it's sometimes hard to speak to motivations, but more interestingly, do you think that a fine-tuning argument can still be made even if we accept some form of multiverse theory? And I know that you're going to go through this more in your presentation, but do you think it's possible to make such an argument?
For the advocate of fine-tuning to make that argument?
Right. So if an advocate of fine-tuning were to accept some form of multiverse theory as a true theory, then, or at least as the most likely theory that captures reality, would they be able to make some form of a fine-tuning argument even given the multiverse?
Yes. What I have proposed is that, well, initially, we can't speak of people's motivations, but I'm going to take a step even farther back and say, okay, that we may actually have good evidence to suggest that there are other universes, that this model may be true, etc., that there really is evidence. And then we'll go through, you often hear, oh, it's just a theory.
Right.
A theory is actually very robust, built on axioms and natural law. So theories are stronger than laws, natural laws. But the multiverse isn't really just, it may be an explanatory hypothesis to get out of fine-tuning, but it's really just a prediction based off of present hypotheses and theories. So we'll talk about that a little bit. So yeah, I'll take the approach of, okay, we really do have evidence for this, and if we want to grant to the objector that, or concede that, okay, there are other universes, but I'm going to argue that doesn't get around the problem of fine-tuning, because in order for the universe or for the multiverse to function properly, even just for a functioning universe, that would be for it to be possible to have life, requires, the mechanisms involved with that are incredibly complex, and the information required for a functioning universe is quite impressive and really, I think, fun. And I don't want to show my hand too soon, but I personally find the multiverse to be very strongly in favor of the fine-tuning argument.
That's very interesting. Of course, Max is going to go into these issues in much more detail, and more issues even, at the lecture that's coming up at the NCAC. Can you give us a brief outline, Max, of what your talk's going to be about?
Sure. It's going to be primarily three-pronged. So the first part of our agenda is to be able to identify the differences between the different models. So as I alluded to earlier, we'll look at the level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4 multiverse, and we'll discuss them and their differences. That way, when we talk about the multiverse or a specific one, people are going to be able to identify them and refer to them respectively. And so if I'm saying, well, if I'm talking about a level 3 multiverse, which is a quantum scenario one, and my discussion partner has in mind a level 1 multiverse, we're going to start talking past each other. So defining our terms is going to be very important. So the first part is getting down the different models. The second part is discussing the fine-tuning aspect of it, and also where does this fit in cosmological arguments, where does this fit with fine-tuning. So we'll go through some of the aspects of fine-tuning. I'm not going to go through all the evidences for fine-tuning because that can be a whole different topic, but I'll work on discuss primarily the mechanisms involved with the different multiverse scenarios to argue for a fine-tuning argument. And I can provide a list for your group of examples of fine-tuning. If you adjust the strong nuclear force, what happens, etc. And what's interesting in some of these models, that the laws of nature would actually change or evolve over time, particularly in quantum scenarios. So that would be really interesting. If they are changing, then how can we even discuss fine-tuning? And then I've got a brief excursus on how on our reasoning process. So the approach that I'll be taking with the multiverse and with fine-tuning and with any cosmological argument is going to be inference to the best explanation. And so I'll briefly explain the reasoning process that we're using. That way, when your group is out interacting in the apologetic field, if somebody wants to challenge the way that they're thinking or their methodologies, they can explain their rationale. So that'll be a brief excursus, kind of a slip into the foundation of how we're thinking, the construction of our thoughts. And then the last part, the third prong, is if there actually are other universes, then what? What does that mean for theism? What does that mean for Christianity? Is there another me out there? Where's your doppelganger? You know, some of those interesting questions like that. And that's some of the stuff that I'm still working on. But I'll propose some of the models that I have proposed. I'll introduce one of my models for how we should understand God in the multiverse and the issue of many yous. As you alluded to, this model was published in Philosophia Christi in the summer issue, and I also presented an extension of that paper in Cambridge in July. So the models that we're working with, or that I'll be presenting, have been peer-reviewed and are going through the academic system. So they're not just whimsical thoughts. I'm trying with models, and they seem to be standing the test. So hopefully the attendees will be able to get a good taste of good, rigorous academic philosophy in a way that will attract them and for them to retain and to be able to put to good use.
I'm sure they will, and I could say I, for one, am looking forward to your lecture with great anticipation. So I really can't wait. I want everyone to remember that the lecture is going to be on Saturday, October 11th, 2014, at Rocky Mountain College in Calgary, Alberta. The address is 4039 Brentwood Road, Northwest. And as we can all see from this short interview, it's going to be a great lecture, highly informative, and it's going to be an opportunity for us all to enter into the discussion at a higher level, to form far more robust views on the issues, and to have a resource to gain further knowledge in the future. So I'd like to thank you for taking the time to be with us today, Max. It's been a great interview, and as I said, I'm really looking forward to it.
You're welcome, as am I.
Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, you too.